that? What do you got?
We're trying to change something.
Skateboarding is a way of learning how to redefine the world around you.
The owners of this country don't care about the poor and young.
Now, baby, push me. Push me again now.
Screaming at a wall.
Welcome back to Screaming at a Wall, you miscreants, misfits, and outcasts of society. It's actually our first recorded interview of the year. I want to welcome Sammytown, aka Slammytown, which was actually the original nickname that I think you had. Maybe prior.
No one calls me that anymore.
No,
yeah.
Not in the pit as much at this stage in the game, or are you just trying to start the pit? Yeah. Man, so I just right off the bat, I just have to say that American Nightmare, and I think we talked about this before, really influenced me. And I had heard that album when I was locked up. And so there was a lot of connections, and there was a lot I was like learning about Fang from, as we were talking about Sick Boy. Sick Boy is the dude that got me into punk rock while I was locked up. But that album to this day, just it connects on such a hard level for me. Do you think that is one of your most significant albums, like that comes from the heart because it was written at a time that you were going through a lot emotionally? And I don't think it's the most popular album either, which is weird.
Definitely not.
Which is weird to me.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. For me, that album probably, as far as what I wrote there, well, the songs that are on there are probably a little deeper than a lot of the other stuff that we, that I've ever done. Since a lot of the material, a lot of at least the lyrics were written when I was in prison, and so I used them when I got out. So I think on a very personal level, that particular record is by far the most personal, you could say. That it's not. There's still some jokes and some cynicism, which Fang, especially early on, was kind of known for. But still, coming from the yard, that's the record I brought with me, 100%, so it was very personal, and as far as why, what happened, that record, we never were really able to promote it either. I know that, like, all my homeboys, I think more people heard about that record in prison than knew about it on the streets, because there was, by the time that record actually came out, it was problematic. I hadn't started getting loaded again yet when it came out, but it wasn't much long after that record came out that I started shooting dope again.
What year? The early 2000s? Is that early?
So
2000s?
that record came out, I believe, in '98, and so I'm pretty sure we recorded it in '98. I paroled in '96. I didn't even go to shows or do anything. Like, I had a baby. My first kid. I got married in the pen. We had a conjugal visit baby. And so I got out, I've got 9-month-old kid. And I'm just trying to make that transition, and I'd stopped getting loaded while I was inside, you know, like, I mean, it took about 5 years before I got cleaned up in there, you know, but I was fucking around hard for a long time. And then I got my first conjugal visit, and that was a big game changer for me. You know, it was definitely like, okay, like this is what's real, you know, what's out there on the yard. Like, that's, you know, I didn't have, I had a determinate sentence. But if I'd kept doing what I'd been doing, you know, I definitely would have spent the rest of my life on the yard, you know, and I had like that moment of clarity, that instance where I'm like, dude, I do not really want to spend the rest of my life on the yard. So I stopped getting loaded, and you know, so I was clean for a long time, you know, and we put that record out, but then I picked up again, and you know, things just started to fall apart, you know, for me and for a lot of other addicts and alcoholics. That's what happens.
It's, I think, a nonstop journey. I mean, even if you've done time before, and I think a lot of people don't really understand that. They understand it a little bit more from an addict's perspective of, once you're an addict, you're always an addict. And people like Danny Trejo that have not touched since the 70s or the 80s or something like that still identifies as that. But I don't think a lot of people understand the connection to people that have done time and still going through what you would go through. And I guess what an addict goes through is, it's constantly always there. It's always at this level that it could emerge if you don't pay it mind. Because I personally I'm going to be out for 20 years. I did 5 years, but yeah, I've been out almost on January 17th, 20 years. But I still go through that process of just not knowing how to deal with certain things, or I guess attack certain things or approach certain things without letting how I used to sort of attack things dictate like my present situation. So it's always like this constant battle. So how did you, for the people that don't know the history of Sammy McBride and Fang, Fang started in 1980, right?
Well, I mean,
Or
Fang
around that
started
time?
actually as what's that?
Oh no, go ahead.
Fang started. I didn't start the band. Fang was started in Connecticut by this guy, Tom Flynn. They actually put out a 7-inch. He moved to California and started Fang back up in California. And I joined the band in around 1980. And then Tom actually quit the band in 1984, and I took the band over in 1984, and to this day, you know, so since 1984, I've had a lot of different people back me up, but I mean, 1984 to then 1989, you know, when I fell and went to prison, you know, the history, that's the history of the band, I guess. Sort of when it started, we were far more well known by other bands that covered our songs than we were known ourselves. So we had a lot of bands that covered Fang songs that got really famous, you know, and I went to prison. So, you know, because there were, some of them were our contemporaries, like Metallica, they cover a Fang song, and
They're from the Bay Area too, right?
yeah, and they were
Yeah.
my contemporaries. We partied
Yeah,
together. You know, there was a big crossover scene, the punk rock and heavy metal in especially in like Berkeley and Oakland. And then Green Day covered a Fang song. They were younger than me. I didn't really know those kids, but they were like around when you know, like I went to prison. You know, they were like little kids running around the scene. And Nirvana covered a Fang song, and we never played with Nirvana. I never met those guys, but they were, I guess, heavily influenced by us, you know. And then I went to prison, and then Kurt Cobain, you know, died. He shot himself in killed
How does,
himself. So.
how does that work for somebody that doesn't know, as far as like a band covering your songs and then they get maybe like a live recording? Do you guys ever see anything from that as far
So
as financially?
the only band that I've really ever gotten much of a kickback from was Green Day, and Green Day, you know, and but we're still like those kids. They made a lot of fucking money. As far as when it trickles down into what you get, it's not a whole lot, but it's still been. It was far more than I ever expected to see some, you know, some shitty punk rock song you write when you're 16 years old, you know.
Yeah. So you guys you've been doing it, like, so you went through this whole process of like doing time and then getting out and then still wanting to continue the band. What do you think the driving force behind that is? Because I think, and you're a traveling band. You guys just came through here a couple months ago, and I got to see you guys play, but unfortunately I didn't get to see you before I knew it. You kind of disappeared and I couldn't find you. But you're sort of like this workhorse. Like if you were compared to like a 35 millimeter camera, there's the Nikon f3 camera, and it's one of the most stablest, you know, reliable, you know, it was in production for a lot of years and people always rely on that as their go-to. And I kind of make those similarities with you and Fang, because you're constantly a presence, whether it goes up and down. You guys you're always maintaining this momentum going forward. What do you think for you drives that? Because it takes a lot of energy, especially as you get older, touring. Sure. What drives that for you?
I mean, I think that it is, it's, it keeps me alive. It keeps me sane. You know, that the drive is the, you know, the cathartic part of playing. You know, that I know for me, when I'm playing music, when I'm doing that, I feel the most alive. You know, that I feel the most present. And when I stop doing it for a while, I find that my mental health suffers. You know, so it drives me, keeping me sane more than I drive it, I guess you could say. Yeah. You know, I fucking love to do it. I love to travel. I love, you know, I love touring. It's definitely not for everybody, you know, but I love punk rock. I love the idea of punk rock, that it is, you know, it's protest music. You know, I mean, the reasons I got into punk rock when I was a kid, like fuck the system, fuck the cops, you know, that shit hasn't changed for me. You know, I still very much believe in it. And in some ways, I'm even more now committed to that than I was as a teenager.
Do you think that the newer bands are coming up with that same outlook that you had and then other people had, as far as like getting into punk rock? Just because of the political landscape, everything that's going on, I would feel like this would be a really good time to, you know, talk about like the system in general. But I think even the way that I look at it, that there's been this manipulation and this even conditioning for like punk rockers nowadays to sort of only look at things on one side, versus being able to really see what the institutions and what the government has done, as far, you know, like I think about like Public Enemy playing at the Democratic convention, right? And it's like that doesn't make sense to me. But then there's other people that back that completely, and then you got other people that are only spotlighting this one side of this political side versus the actual system itself. And Do you see that in a similar way? And
I think so. I mean, I think that we're dealing with a lot of issues that are systemic issues, and yeah, having certain bands playing for certain things, I don't necessarily agree with that. I will say that for me, one of the most important things is to listen to the kids, because for me, I remember when I was 15, 16, 18, when things were real and I was young, and the world, we all thought we were going to die from a nuclear war, but the you know the kids are the ones that are usually on the cutting edge of shit. They're the ones, like I've gone out, and I've been to a lot of protests in the last 5 years, and I've been out on the front line, but I'm like the oldest guy there, and it's the kids. And I think what I've seen, especially in like a lot of the older guys in the scene, is they become their fathers. Those fucking kids don't know shit. Get off my yard, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's not who I want to be. I think really, if you want change, if you want to really know what's going on, you got to listen to the kids, and even if what they're saying is something that you're having a hard time understanding, remember when you were a kid, and you fucking got a mohawk and you pierced your ear and your dad beat your ass for it, or you got jumped because you had green hair, and you're like, fuck you, you don't understand. Don't be your dad. Yeah. Don't be the guy driving down the street going, you kids don't fucking know what you're doing. You're just a bunch of fucking idiots, and so that's the important thing to me.
And I think too, wasn't that the point? Like the point of, I guess, representing yourself or expressing yourself in whatever way that was, like the color of your hair or earrings or whatever. And like, there was dudes that got beat up for that. Like you, I'm sure, had gotten beat up. Yeah. My buddy Sick Boy did. I mean, it was a different story when I got out in the 2000s. It was a lot more acceptable. And sure. Like you're talking about, the older guys are like, man, you didn't have to deal with this. You didn't have. I mean, you guys basically went through it so people didn't have to go through that anymore. That was, in my eyes, the point, that you were, you express yourself how you want to express yourself without being judged or beat up or whatever. And it got to that point. And that's kind of what you wanted, right? Like, or the people in that scene. I mean, at the end of the day, that was like kind of the point. It's like, it doesn't matter how I look. It's like who I am as a person.
Right. Yeah. And it's about opening your mind, questioning everything, at least for me, right. Like, it's like, question everything, and don't take anything. And I think that's, and I get to, as you get older, it gets harder, because it's easier to get, tunnel vision, but I also think it's super important to keep an open mind, and bringing it back to the penitentiary, that is like the last place to have an open mind. Having an open mind in prison is a dangerous. You
could get beat up a lot. Yeah.
You get stabbed or killed. I mean, it ain't no joke, depending on where you're at. And so that's that's a whole different set of circumstances.
Yeah, I would actually like to get back to that and then just talk about your experience. But I did want to talk a little bit about it, since you touched on it, because I think that is also an important side to the energy of punk rock. And one of the reasons that I was attracted to it was all about questioning yourself. And at that time when I got into it, when I was in prison, I mean, that person that I was, I had no idea who that was anymore. There were so many masks, so many layers I put on, and then to see like what I adopted at a certain point was like, this is not me. So it was like for me to start questioning myself, start to question my beliefs, start to question like all these things that led me up into that point. And that's what I was alluding to earlier when I was, because I think it's a youthful spirit to have, is to always quit. Like that's what a kid is like, why is this way, why is this, and then we get to why you're like, shut up. But I encourage my daughter to do that, and I'm like, if I don't know it, we will look it up and we'll find out what it, and I love that energy. And I think as a lot of people get older, especially in the punk rock scene, they lose that because they get stuck in their myopic view of how things should be at a certain point, because it's just easier. I mean, it's a pain in the ass, like on the soul, to constantly question everything that's going on.
It's a work. It is. It's fucking work. Yeah. No, I agree. It's funny. I'd never seen that movie, The Matrix, and I actually watched it last night.
Oh shit.
Annalisa's like, we've got to watch this movie,
it's a must.
And I never saw it in there, like, I don't know if, it's probably been a long time since you've seen it, but there's the rat, the guy who fucking, he rats out everybody. But he was like, dude, this is like living in a real world. It's too much work. I'd rather rat on these fools and just fucking, close the door so I don't have to think, it's like living, questioning, it's work, it's fucking hard work. I get that, and it's easier. It's often easier for people to take the easy way out, and I get that too. Not saying that, not to say that everybody took the easy way out is like a rat, but the point is that it's work, and there are times too when I know it's like, dude, like I get, anybody gets tired, and sure, it's where you want to rest on your laurels, but I truly hope for me that I might take breaks. In fact, kind of what I've been doing lately is, when COVID hit, we sort of changed our role for a little while. And although we're working our asses off, it is kind of taking a break from the kind of work I was doing before, which is more frontline work,
What so do you do? I actually want to talk about there was two things I want to know, because do you do Fang like full time, or are there
no Fang we don't we don't make any money, Fang's like, we're not like a money making band, we when we're out on the road, we make enough money to survive on the road, and so, but no, I mean, I've done a lot of things over the years. I had a sober house for men in Oakland for a long time that I owned and operated. I had a couple tattoo shops up in the Bay Area, one in Oakland and one in Alameda. And I've worked as a drug and alcohol counselor and done shit like that.
Oh, okay.
And so, I was working as a drug and alcohol counselor down in Southern California when COVID hit. I'd moved down to SoCal, and and I lived there for a year, and I was working down there, and COVID hit, and I had gotten burned out. I'd been working with guys for a long time with the sober house, and then as a counselor, and I needed a break, because I felt I was getting jaded, not questioning myself enough.
Oh yeah.
And so since COVID hit, I moved to Arizona. So
getting back to you doing time, was that something that you at one point was like, I have to, I guess like help out people that were in the same position that I was at one point? And then, you know, another thing is, how did you end up doing time for the people that don't know?
Yeah,
Do you want to talk
sure.
about that?
Yeah. So I started dealing drugs super young, you know, and so I've been a career drug dealer from the time I started at 12, slinging dope, you know, and um, that was always something I did, you know. The thing that kind of worked in my favor, I was brought into the Northern California acid family when I was 15 years old. I was given a gun, you know, and you know, we moved a shit ton of fucking drugs all over the country, and so
was this when you were in Fang, or
yeah. I mean, actually, it was
playing music and
right. And so what happened for me was it worked out really well because I went to work for the family, and you know, I was like running acid to New York and working for them, but they also knew I played in a band. So when we'd go on tour, I made connections in all the cities that we played in. Like we'd roll into a city and I'd ask the promoter, I said, who's the local pot dealer? You know, and I'd tell him I want to buy some pot, you know, and he'd introduce me to that guy. I'm like, hey, look, like I'm on the road right now, but if you're interested, when I get back to California, I'll send you some acid, maybe some other stuff. And if you're interested, we can set up some business, you know? So that's what I did, you know, I started doing that at 16 when we started touring. So I built up my own network of customers across the United States, you know. So by the time I was 18, I had a whole network of customers across the US.
That was a perfect setup, right? You were like a traveling salesman for
it worked very well. It worked very well. It did. So and then I ended up moved the band to Europe in 1985, you know, and I took 100,000 hits acid to Europe with me and started dealing over there, set up. I had a girlfriend in Germany who was dealing for me, and then we were going back and forth to Europe, and I was continuing to deal in the US.
What was the reason for wanting to move the band over to Europe?
What was the reason?
And you had lived, right? You had moved with your dad when you were younger. That's how you got into punk rock, was when you moved to Europe,
to
right?
Wales when I was 12.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that's where I got introduced to the Sex Pistols. So I've always liked, you know, I mean, I started touring really young. I always liked to travel. We had toured the US and Canada a bunch, and so it just seemed like the sort of next thing to do. You know, it was all punk rock, you know, in 85 was all DIY, you know, like I got a phone number for somebody in Germany, and, you know, and I had resources. That was one thing, because I was a drug dealer, you know, I had resources that maybe some other bands didn't have, you know. So since I could put together 100,000 hits of acid and, you know, get on a plane to the UK and then to Germany, it made it a little easier for us, you know, than other bands that were trying to do what we were doing. Because we got to, you know, Europe, and nobody had ever heard of us. You know, we were some American punk rock band. But, you know, Germany worked really well, you know. And so, like, we get there, and immediately I felt like I found, like, when I got to Bremen, where we ended up living, like, I'm like, these are my people, because they drank like I drank. They were fucking idiots. They got in fights all the time. It was just like it was like, this is home, you know. Yeah. Like, they were more my people than than my people in Oakland, and I really loved it there, so, and also it worked on a lot of levels, it worked business wise, if acid was hard to come by, and it was easy for me to set up shop, and to do well.
Do you mind if I ask you what that process was like so that the acid that you got was from the United States and then you would bring it back to Europe?
So the first time we went there, I had a box of Land Shark records, and so I used to, through the family, we'd get crystal LSD in its crystallized form, and we'd make blotter paper or window pane. And so I wanted to take a bunch of acid with me, so I had made 100,000 hits. I took blotter paper and I didn't perf it, so there wasn't the little tiny perforations, so it was just a piece of paper, and I dipped it all and got it ready, and then I put those inside the records, in the Fang records, and then it just looked like an extra piece of paper, like thick piece of paper in a record, and then took that with me to Europe, and then when I came back, we were there for a year, we toured, we recorded a record, got hooked up, then I would just send it in the fucking mail. That was one thing about acid that was super easy. It's like nobody was looking for it.
Kind of hard to detect, right?
Dogs can't smell it.
Right. I'm gonna shut down my blinds because the light's coming in weird. Still the same. It's all good. Go ahead.
That worked. Sammy. That worked great.
Yeah. So you moved the band to Europe, and you're over there.
So things were going well. At the same time, I was I also was an off and on junkie. I'd started using, I started shooting up when I was 14, shooting speed. Got my first heroin habit when I was 16, and I managed to, kick the first time when I was 17, managed to keep it all together for a while, for a number of years. But what finally happened, my girlfriend in Germany got busted. Her and her roommate, they had a party pad. They were dealing out of the house, and the cops finally, probably somebody ratted on them. Cops got wind, and they rushed the house. The roommate rolled, told them everything, asked with my girlfriend in Germany, went to prison in Germany. I was wanted by Interpol for international drug trafficking. And I got the phone call. I got a phone call. We had a tour set up. We were supposed to record our 5th record, had everything all set up. It's like 3 days before we were supposed to leave, I got the phone call from a friend of mine. It's like, don't come back. You're wanted. Everything went to hell. It's all bad. And that was when things really started falling apart for me. And so
it was like the deal breaker.
Yeah, I couldn't leave the. And for me, I'd gone to jail a bunch of times. I caught my first felony when I was 13 years old. But nothing like that it was different, I knew if I couldn't leave the country. I didn't know if they were actually going to come and try and get me. I didn't really know how that worked at that time. I was 23 years old. And also my habit had gotten, I was really strung out on heroin, and my habit gotten really bad, and things just spiraled downhill. And what ended up happening was that there was this woman, she was a customer of mine out of Virginia, and she'd been a really good customer. When we hung out, we would be together. And finally, I'm like, well, why don't you move to California, be my old lady, and you can work with me. And so she moved to California, and she would take care of business for me when I was out of town. And she was not an addict. She was not an alcoholic, and she had a lot of resentments towards me because of my heroin addiction. And I would always, all the fucking shit. Oh, I'll kick. It's, like I'm gonna stop, blah blah. All that shit that we tell people. But what ended up happening was that she got tired of my bullshit, and my addiction. We were still making a lot of money, but a lot of it was going to feed my heroin addiction. So she ended up, she'd met all my people, by being my old lady. She got together with my best customer, this guy out of Texas. He would fly out to California a couple times a month, do really big deals. And she, like a couple times he'd come through when I'd been out of town, and she had to take care of the deal, and he'd come stay at our apartment. So they ended up getting together. And so what happened was that he was actually in town. I got a phone call, and it was from this guy out of Salt Lake City that I'd set up in business out there. And the phone rang, I answered the phone, and he's acting real weird, and he acted so weird, I started getting paranoid. I'm like, dude, like what the fuck's going on, and he finally is like, look, he goes, I gotta level with you, because I think I said, look, because when I met him, he was about to lose his house and all this shit. And I'm like, dude, I fucking like helped you out. I set you up. I funded you a bunch of shit to get you on your feet, And he's like, no, you're right. He goes, look, Dixie, that was my old lady's name. Dixie's been telling me, and I assume telling other people, that you're ripping people off, and that you're fucking people over, and that she's going to move to Texas with this guy, with my best customer, and we were going to do one more deal, and then she's going to move and only do business with her. And once she got set up in Texas, she was going to give him her number, and they were going to start doing business together. So I told him, I said, okay, I said, thanks for leveling with me. I'm fucking devastated here. I told him, I'll call you back. I hung up the phone. I'm sitting there. I don't really know what to do. The phone rings again. It's this mutual friend of me and my old lady's, this guy on the East Coast. And she had not told him what's going on. So he's like, hey, what's up? I just wanted to call, let you know I got that money, and I put it in with the other money. Now, at this point, I know shit's fucked up, so I didn't say anything, like what money, because I knew that shady shit had been going on. So I just asked him, like, so how much money is there total? And he said, well, that was another $5,000, and there's $20,000 that's set aside. And I'm like, okay, all right. I said, thanks. And I just hung up the phone. So within a 10-minute period, I get 2 phone calls that I find out my old lady's been cheating on me. She's about to try and take my business from me. And she's been pulling money off the side and taking our money and putting an egg, as a nest egg somewhere for when she moves. So I left. I just walked out of the house. I took off because I didn't know what to do. I was pissed. I went, shot a bunch of dope, got a bunch of whiskey, got super fucked up, and I came back to the house to confront her about it. And when I walked in the door, the guy from Texas was coming out of my bedroom, and he was pulling his boxer shorts up, and I fucking lost it. I tried killing both of them. Ultimately, he ran. He was able to escape. He got away, and she didn't make it out. So that was in 1989. I immediately ran. I was on the run for 6 months. Finally, I was arrested by federal marshals in Anchorage, Alaska. on an interstate flight warrant to avoid prosecution. They brought me back to Oakland, and I was charged with first-degree murder. And at the time, there were so many 187s in California that they pretty much were offering everybody manslaughter pleas, just to clear the fucking dockets, because it was a record year for homicides. So pretty much everyone I knew got offered a manslaughter deal. And finally, it took a while for me to get offered a manslaughter deal, but they finally offered me 11 years flat manslaughter. They first offered me a 15 to life deal. I'm like, I'm not taking a life deal, I'll take it to the box, and then, you guys can give me life, but I'm not going to take a life deal. But they finally offered me, at that time, 11 years was the top end of manslaughter. And when they offered me that, I'm like, okay, where do I sign? Let's go.
I have a question for you about the state of mind that you were in, like prior to going to Dixie's place. Had you up until that point, had you ever felt that, I guess, like the anger or I call it flashes of red, and I am no way justifying like the actions of when you're in that state, but I've been in states where I have lost my shit and I don't have control over like the outcome. It's not like an outcome that I want, whether it be through like a violent means or like whatever. This is also, going back to what I was talking about, like the struggles that I still deal with to this day, because I know that I can get to a point that most people have never even gotten close to. Had you ever felt that anger inside of you before that happening, or was this a trigger that you had never experienced before?
Good question. A few times, but not like that. Like when I was young, I had a situation arise with a bully, a school bully, and that time, like I lost it out of I was afraid, and I got so afraid that I finally became enraged and didn't it is for me a state of mind that is unlike anything else, and I've only been there a couple times in my life, certainly like in prison, and for me it's come out of a lot of rage or out of a lot of fear. Like I've gotten scared enough like that when I was a little kid, that I got so scared that it was a total disassociation, and then it's total disassociation, and then just doing whatever, where you there's certainly not a lot of thought process going to it. I know when I got to San Quentin, there was a child molester who was put on the tier, and I had an older cellie, and I was 25. By the time I got to Quentin, I was 25. I got busted when I was 24. By the time I actually got to Quentin, I was 25. 25-year-old kid, really. And this child molester put on the tier. We were told to handle it, and we rushed up on this guy and we grabbed him and we threw him over the fourth tier. I was scared. I was fucking terrified because I knew what we were going to do. But there's a point where either through fear, at least for me, or through anger, where I can completely disassociate from my actions and do things that normally would never happen, that I couldn't do otherwise, and yeah, that's an interesting question. Not many, I don't usually talk about that, but certainly that is
Well, I
something
mean,
that happened.
I appreciate it because because again, it's really trying to understand that process, because I think that it's easy for people to judge people that have done certain things in their life, and there's certain people that can't forgive that. But I mean,
Sure.
we were talking about questioning everything, and it's like one of those things that I question people that are quick to judge someone that was in a situation, say like yours, or the things that I did, is that, but there's no judgment towards, I think, society, towards government, through corporations, where there's actions that are done to harm people on a daily, and for whether it be for resources or profit or whatever. And it's just interesting to me that people can't um they they don't think those two things are connected.
They
and
can't see the correlation between those two things. That, yeah, no,
and it's I mean, it's there again. People that I think question things, like they see those things, especially if you've done time, and then you having to look at yourself when you were locked up, like going through that process. I'm sure you didn't get to that point right away, where you're like, it took you to the point of going to that conjugal visit. When you And also to be a punk rocker, like to be a punk rocker, and this is something that we had Shane Enholm on the podcast, where he was, I mean, at that point, I think he was more of a dope fiend than a punk rocker, but
right.
he was still a punk, had long hair, and he basically had to shift. He had to change and adapt. And so what was that like for you, going from, a punk rock scene to going to the prison scene? Because those are two completely different environments.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that you bring up. Um, One of the things that I will say, is like society and certain aspects of some of the elements that I was involved in. The Acid family, those guys were, there were some older hippies in it, but there were also gangsters and businessmen. They did not fuck around. People got killed. It was not peace and love, because it was millions and millions of dollars. So when I first did what I did, one of the things that we were taught is you never, when I was brought into the family, it was like, you never jump a customer, you never jump a connect. And so I didn't feel any remorse for what I had done. For a long time, I felt justified for what I had done. But that is a construct of, the gangster culture, toxic masculinity, the criminal underworld, which, teaches you certain rules and things that, that in certain situations may save your life, but in other situations for the normal world, like you said, can people see the correlation? People can't see the correlation between poverty and crime. So,
Right.
to get anybody to see a correlation between growing up in a certain situation and the outcomes, I don't mean to. I take full responsibility for what I did in no way, but I think that there are certain things in society that definitely created circumstances that had a lot to do with why I did what I did, you know. But coming into prison, you know, like you said, as a punk rock kid, from the scene, and you know, this was, you know, 1990, you know, and they didn't have level 5s at that time in California, you know, and I had level 4 points, you know. I rolled into San Quentin, and then I rolled, you know, San Quentin's Northern California reception, and then I ended up down in Soledad on the Central Yard, and it was a level 4. It's level 3 and 4 yard. They had both on that yard, and you know, that was a different world than anything I had ever experienced. You know, especially being young, you know, it's you know, it's dangerous. It's deadly, and it's very easy to stop questioning yourself because you're just in survival mode, you know. Like it's you know, your hypervigilance is always present, and it becomes apparent early on, you know. Like I did fine in San Quentin. Like I said, me and my cellie threw that guy off the tier. We really, I had homeboys that had come from the county jail with me, that knew me. So that transition, although it was rough because, you know, like I saw my first yard killing after I was, you know, there. I saw a guy get his head smashed in with a dumbbell. You know, probably in the first week I was there, you know, but really in Soledad, you know, it was definitely like, it was easy to get institutionalized. It's easy to fall in, you know, and I got tested as soon as I rolled up, and I saw what happened if you broke, you know. Like there was a guy that we came in around the same time, and this one dude kept pushing me, and I ended up stabbing him in the shower. You know, same guy stood the line with me when we had a situation on the yard, you know, because he was just trying to see if I was going to break, you know, and that was not that. I mean, at the time, I'm like, this is insane, you know. This is, you know, the insanity of the penitentiary. But you know, I also saw a guy come in, and he broke, and his, you know, to get victimized like that on a regular basis, I'm like, I you know, it was horrible to watch, horrible to see, horrible to hear, you know. And you know, you have to make horrible choices when you get on the yard, and then you have to live with those choices too, you know. And so I think a lot of times it's easier to just get institutionalized. I mean, you know, go with the flow, you know. And I did that for a number of years till I had the realization, like, dude, this is insane. Hold on for 1 second. I gotta plug in.
Yeah, how much time do you have, Sam? Do you go by Sammy
clean
or
and
Sam?
sober time. Sammy's fine. It's,
Okay.
14 years.
14 years.
Yeah. So I got out and was doing well for a while, started fucking up again. And I was off and running for 8 years, doing armed robberies, collections down in Texas. Should have gone back to prison many times.
So So when you were busted, did you end up? So were you doing dope when you were in there too? In there for?
Yeah, I was, I never caught a habit in prison, but certainly I was shooting dope, drinking Pruno, getting loaded, and part of the drug trade in prison as well. Like after I made my bones and people got to know me and I became a reg, I dropped points. I was down to level 3 points. I was on the 1 yard in Solano, which is a level 3 yard. And I, hung out with the fellas there. They all knew me. And I was in this weird position because there weren't many white boys from Alameda County. And so shit would kick off on the yard and they'd like gaffle everybody up and they'd be going through everybody's files and they'd say, what? Alameda? And they kicked me loose because, I was an affiliate. They didn't, and they figured that I just got, and so I was, for a little while, I kind of had since the cops never thought I was involved in anything, it opened things up for me to be able to make some moves. So then I was, involved in the trade, in the drug trade on the yard. And, I mean, that's how it goes.
Yeah.
But I never got a habit in the pen. I think especially like in Soledad, I don't know, I would say 80% of the stabbings that went down on that yard were all behind drug debts or gambling debts. And even before I'd gone to the pen, there was this old dude named Buck. We were in county jail together, and he sat me down. He's like, look, you're going down. He said, this is what you need to know. He said, don't gamble. He said, don't get into debt. He said, if you do dope, don't get strung out, and I, for whatever reason, I took those words to heart,
It was good that you did, because I saw a good amount of dudes that I thought were really good guys roll it up because they got into drug debt. Like,
yeah, and so then they either, are gonna take the stabbing or fucking, or they have to fucking take the other route, and that also never was going to be for me.
No, yeah. So you're pretty heavily into where you're at. You were just this is where I'm at, and that's what happened with me, is I just adapted. There was a point when I was just like, I'm never gonna go home, even though I had 5 years. Especially to the point
right?
where it was, and then the stuff I was doing was like, all right, like, but that's what got me to the point where I was like pretty close to being being transferred across the street to High Desert, which was completely different than Susanville. I was on the 3 yard there, and I was fortunate enough to be around a lot of solid lifers that, helped me out and made me look at life a little bit differently. But I was this close to going to High Desert State Prison. I know if I had went across the street, I wouldn't be here right now having this interview. Right. It would have been completely different. But I had gotten to the point where I was just like, I had so much stress, and I had gotten to the point where I realized that I had so much stress on my shoulders, not because of my environment, because of the choices that I was making. And I got to that point that you were talking about earlier, being in the conjugal visit, and I don't know exactly specifically what happened. I was pretty close to connecting with the prison gang in there, and I was pretty close to doing something that I could have got caught for or not, but I was that close. And it all sort of transpired at that time when I got into punk rock, and then I started to question, of course, everything that was going on around me. But it was at that point that I was just like, I'm applying all this pressure on myself. I don't have to do the things that that could potentially put me in a situation where I'm locked up for the rest of my life. And that's when I had like this moment of clarity. Talk about that moment of clarity, like building up to the point. And I don't know if we had mentioned how much time you got.
Well, yeah. So I pled out to manslaughter. I got an 11-year sentence.
Oh, okay.
At that time in California, there was halftime. So I served 7 years on 11 because I did end up in the hole for 5 months in Soledad, and picked up more time here and there. So I didn't get out in 5.5. But it wasn't like. It's funny because you said like what led up to it. I was involved, like we were doing shit on the yard. I hadn't been caught for anything yet, but in my mind, I was never getting out of prison. I was institutionalized. It's like I had a date, but in my mind, it's like I was just very involved in that lifestyle, and we had done a bunch of shit on the yard, and like I said, I just hadn't been fucking caught for anything yet, but it was yet, I knew it was gonna happen, and I wasn't even tripping on it. But I got married. It took me like my wife and I, we'd started writing this woman that I knew on the streets when I was in county jail. We started writing letters. She came to see me in San Quentin. I moved down to Soledad. She's come down to Soledad. She was living in San Francisco. And we got engaged to be married. I started going through the process to get married when I was in Soledad, but then I got busted for inciting and spent a bunch of time in the hole. And then they actually ended up, I was in the hole so long that my point ended up dropping, and they ended up dropping the charge because they couldn't prove it. So then I got transferred to a level 3 yard in Solano. And so it took us years to get married. And then after we were married, it took us quite a bit of time to actually get our first conjugal visit. All that shit takes. So I'd been down 5 years before we had that first conjugal visit. And so I wasn't trying to do anything different. I wasn't, but I was in this little apartment, and with my wife, and I think it was such a culture shock, like so alien at that point to me. And in Solano, it's a new prison, and they have the conjugal visit apartments built into the prison itself. It's not like in other prisons, where they have the trailer outside. Mm-hmm. They're like built in, and over the kitchen sink is a window, and you could see out to where the yard is. You can't see, you're not like looking onto the yard, because then you'd have all the guys on the yard. Yeah. But you can see over to where the yard is. And I'm sitting on the couch, and my wife's up there making dinner, and I look out the window and I see the yard, and it was just like, it was like a switch. It was like, holy shit, like this is a reality, and that's a reality. And this is a much better fucking reality, and it was such a fucking game changer. Like I said, I didn't question what I had done up until that point, to be honest. Like I said, I felt justified for what I had done. And man, like when I realized, it's like, dude, I don't want to spend the rest of my life on the yard, then I had to look at everything, and it was that was a very difficult time. I decided I actually wanted to get out of prison but I was involved, you know, and it's not like I could go back out on the yard and say, hey fellas, you know, I love you, but you guys, I'm just gonna have to sit this one out. It doesn't fucking work that way, you know. And so that period of time for me was probably the hardest time I ever did, because you know, I was working through trying to deal with the guilt for what I had done. I was still involved in the dope trade on the yard. I stopped getting loaded though, but every time shit came in, I would get broken off my share, you know. And so I was still out selling dope on the yard, and when shit went down, I had to be there if shit went down. So that was an exceedingly hard time for me, because I kept doing what I was doing, but I didn't want to do it. And I was actually then afraid of getting caught. Yeah. Before, I had total acceptance, going, at some point, I'm just going to get caught, whatever, no big deal. But that was, I think I probably grew, like, aged 10 years in like that period of time. But what ended up happening was my points dropped again because I didn't get caught. And I dropped down to level 2 points, and I was transferred to Vacaville. And if anybody knows about Vacaville is
the medical place, right? They would send all.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like Disneyland. It's funny because I had the only counselor I've ever had who ever did anything for me when I was in the pen. This counselor's like, look, you're about to drop down to level 2. Like, what do you want to do? And I'd heard that at Vacaville, you could get conjugal visits monthly. You know, in Solano, you get them about every 3 months. But I heard, because it's a medical facility, there wasn't that many people that could get conjugal visits, that they were a lot faster. And so I said, hey, I heard Vacaville's a place I want to go to, Vacaville. And so he said, well, let me see what I can do. And he found a job for me in Vacaville, reading books onto tape for blind people. So yeah, I was like, weird fucking state of events. But he's like, well, let me see if I can get you this job in Vacaville. And if I can, then they'll transfer you over there. So its story gets even weirder. So he pulls me back like a couple days later. He goes, look, there's an opening over there, but they want to hear you. He said, what they're looking for is for somebody to do children's books.
1 second. This is
glitching.
Hold on. Yeah, there was like a phone call that came in. This is not my computer. I had to grab someone else's computer. Is it still record? Okay, it's still, my bad. All right, you're good.
Okay. So my counselor comes, he goes, there is a job opening over there, but they want somebody to do children's books for blind kids. Okay, so I'm like, and he goes, they want to be able to hear what you sound like, you know. And so, like I said, I'm like super institutionalized still. I'm very, but I want to try and do something different. And so he tells me this. He goes, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna bring a tape recorder in, and you're gonna have to read some sort of kid's story onto tape, and I'm going to take it back to them. I'm like, okay, this is even weirder, but fuck it.
Whatever you
like,
got to do.
Whatever, you know. And we're having this discussion, and somebody gets stabbed on the yard. So we're having this discussion. All of a sudden, the alarm hits. Everybody's like laying down.
Oh, man.
I'm stuck in the office. I'm like, great. He goes, okay. He goes, well, I don't know what's going on out there. You're going to have to wait for custody to walk you back to your cell, but I'll pull you out tomorrow to read some kid's book. I'm like, oh, great. So I go back to the cell. We're slammed because some dude got fucked off. You know, I'm like, I'm going to get pulled out of my cell tomorrow to read a kid's book. I can't get to the library. I certainly got any fucking kids books in my cell. So I wrote a children's story that night. And And I wrote this story. It was called Stuttering Ben. It was about a kid who got bullied and he had a dog. And the next day I get pulled out of the cell and I've got this story that I wrote, and it's got like, I'm doing like dog noises and little kids' voices and all this shit. And, and he was like, yeah, I think he was kind of blown away. And so he said, okay, well, so he took that to the guard who ran the program. And so she came to interview me, and but she, like, I'd gone to the hole for months in Soledad for inciting, and so she really didn't want to hire me, but I guess she was so impressed with the story and the fact that I'd written it myself and all that. She came and she sat down and she's like, like, I've read your C files. She goes, I didn't want to have anything to fucking do with you. I think you're a problem. You've got ties to these guys and we don't play that shit. And I'm like, look, I'm just trying to fucking, make a change here. And, so she's like, all right. She goes, I'm going to give you a shot. She goes, I listened to the tape. I was impressed. So I transferred over to Vacaville, and I started a fucking program where we did children's books onto tape for blind kids. And that was how
where can I listen to this? This got to be somewhere.
So there was this whole program that was run out of Vacaville called the Blind Project. And I don't know if it still exists anymore. I got one homeboy that I'm still in touch with that was also that he worked on the Blind Project, and I set up, we were doing children's stories. We'd have like 4 mics, and I would rewrite a children's story like in radio play form, and we would do these, like, everyone had different characters and we did sound effects, and we made a whole catalog while I was there of different children's stories for blind kids, to listen to. And so that and Vacaville, Vacaville was like Disneyland. It was an easy yard to do time on. There was there was a couple incidents that happened, but it was not it was easy. Like, I associated there with whoever I fucking wanted to. I'd also been down at that time for a number of years. I'd been around for a long time. I wasn't a kid anymore. People knew me from other prisons. So it kind of, the way that prison was, and the fact that I'd been around, pretty made it so I could do whatever the fuck I wanted to do. And so that's
is that where you paroled from?
Yeah, and that is where I paroled from.
Man, I want to hear like Where the Wild Things Are read by you. That would be freaking epic.
Oh yeah, I don't even know. If that program still, I hope that program still exists. It was a cool program. I don't think when I left, I think that the children's, we put a whole catalog together. I had a copy of the catalog for years. I paroled with it, the children's books. It was called The Listening Corner, and we had and I had actually a copy of that catalog that had all the books listed. But I don't know. It was a solid program. It was mostly lifers that were involved doing it. Been down for a long time. Yeah, but yeah,
that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
No, it really does. I just, as a fan of reading and a fan of hanging out with my daughter who's 9, that's what we do. Like, the first thing that she does in the morning is she grabs her book and she starts reading, and she's gotten in the habit of like having myself or her mom like read with her. So we'll do like the characters, and I love that type of shit. So the fact that you
That's
did that is
awesome.
like so cool. Did that spark anything inside of you to be like, man, I might be onto something with like my voice and like being able to do something creatively like that? Or is this an extension of writing punk rock or just music in general?
I mean, I think that it wasn't that I never thought about it, but also it was just you know, coming out of prison, especially after having, killed somebody, having killed your girlfriend, you are starting with such at such a fucked up place.
Yeah.
That even you asked about like playing music again, that was a hard decision. I didn't go to shows and I didn't start doing anything for a while, and I really thought that I wasn't going to, and then I started hanging around. I started hanging with a friend of mine who was sober, and he he really pushed me. He's like, dude, you should start playing music again. And so me and a couple other old friends just started fucking around, and it lit it all back up for me, And the other thing about it is, I mean, it's a I've taken a lot of flack, over the years. Certainly I've dealt, with a lot of people that are pissed that have, things to say about what I did, and I think that's important. I also think it's important to have made myself available. It's like, if you want to talk about it, I'll sit down and talk to you about it. Like, let's talk about it. You're mad at what I did. Don't think that I'm not mad about what I did. You think what I did was wrong. Don't think that I don't think what I did was wrong. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about what happened. Let's talk about the system. Let's talk about the prison system. Let's talk about rehabilitation. Let's talk about second chances. I also think, as far as it's also important that you come out of the system, you're institutionalized, you're fucked up. It's easy. It's so easy to go back, and that's another thing. When I got out, after I'd been out for a while, I started playing. It's like, no, I think it's important that people know you can go to prison. You can go to prison for a long time, and you can get out and stay out of prison and do the things that you want to do.
Was there just motivation just to start up Fang again, or did you ever think about just completely starting something fresh, something different than what you had done before?
I mean, when I first started screwing around with my buddies, we were just like, I thought it was going to be something different, and my one buddy's like, you're in a position where, because people did know about Fang, the Nirvana cover had come out, that if you want to go back to playing music, it would be a lot easier to do it if you just resurrected Fang.
Right.
And
where were you at when that cover came out? How much longer were you weren't inside, you were already out?
I was in the pen. I was in the pen.
How did you find out about that?
Well, I found out about Nirvana when I was in Soledad. I mean, I didn't know that they knew anything about Fang, but there was a radio station. My cellie had a radio when I first got to Soledad, and we would listen to the radio. He would mostly listen to country and western, but they had a rock station, and down there in the Salinas Valley. And the first time I heard Nirvana on the radio, I'm like, dude, that's a punk rock band on like normal radio. I'm like, what the fuck, you know? So I had heard of Nirvana and had listened to them for a few years before a friend of mine wrote me a letter and said, hey, that band Nirvana, they do a cover of The Money Will Roll Right In. But I don't think I actually heard it until, I don't know if I actually heard it until after I got out. And by then Kurt Cobain had killed himself. So, you know, it was, so I went back and forth on playing it and opening myself up to the inevitable criticism, you know, to the inevitable possible, well, when we played our first show back it was in San Francisco, we played with the Dwarves, and it was at a club called the Trocadero. Big show, fucking sold out. It was, I think that place held like 800 people or something like that, you know. And I get to the venue, and the promoter's this guy Jorge, and Jorge's like, hey, we got to talk right now. Come up to my office. And we go up to his office, and he's like, look, there's been 10 death threats called in about this show. And he goes, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I said, fuck it, let's get some paint and we'll paint a target on my shirt. So that way, make sure that if somebody's going to fucking do something stupid, they get the right guy, you know? And he's like, what? I'm like, I'm kidding about the target thing, but I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, if I'd have had a Target shirt, I probably would have wore it too, just because I had to make a decision. It's like, well, I can play music and I can put myself out there. I can put myself in a position to have difficult conversations. I can put myself into a position to have to sit down with people who I know hate me. But that was what punk rock was about in the first place for me. Mm-hmm. You know, like if I wasn't willing to put my ass on the line to pierce my ear, I would never have been a punk rocker in the first place. You know, so it's like, okay, here's a situation. It's like, are you going to put your ass on the line, you know, to maybe have some conversations, maybe talk about some redemption, some forgiveness, to show people it's like, okay, horrible things happen, and we can either hate somebody forever, or maybe we can, you know, see that the system is fucked up, and second chances are important. Rehabilitation is fucking important. You know, all these things.
Yeah, it could have been I would imagine a lot easier just to sort of fall under the radar, even if you started a new band under a different name. It would have been a lot easier, right? You wouldn't have had to as much, you know what I mean? Like to
I think even if it just playing music, if I, you know, no matter what the name of the band would have been, I think, and that's what it came down to, because I thought no matter what the name of the band is going to be, if people know I'm in the band, it's going to be the same thing. So I might as well just call it Fang and do it anyway. You know, I think is kind of where I got to at that point.
So that actually kind of leads into another question I had, because I had found out that you had did a reality show at one point or something like that. Like I saw a trailer where you were, I guess, trying to connect with other people that were either addicts. It's a really short trailer, and I didn't find anything else on the trailer about it. But what was that whole situation? Because I know that one of the it leaves you in a cliffhanger where you were going to actually try to talk to the mother of the victim of your girlfriend, and then, like I said, I didn't find anything. What was that whole event?
So we had I was working with the guy, this guy Steve Gerbson, and we we were working on this reality TV show. It never happened. Like we got some traction on it. I got a whole lesson in Hollywood and in that whole game, and ultimately it sort of died on the vine, so to speak. And
what was the premise for it? For
the premise for it was it's a reality TV show, which I mean it's what I did anyway, helping guys, especially guys getting out of prison, trying to reintegrate into society. Specifically, mostly drug addicts, though. Drug addicts that are, like I came out of the pen. I was clean and sober, but I didn't really work a program. Did a few years, was doing well, and I picked up again. And then I told you I was off and running for about 8 years. Finally, 14 years ago, I got clean and sober, and actually, got into recovery and got very involved. So through that, the idea of the show was just this guy had found out about me through a mutual friend. He came up from LA to see what I was doing, and he's like, "Okay, let's see if we can get somebody to pick this up." And it just we never, we had some interest, but it just like a lot of, there's a million good ideas in Hollywood or in LA, and 5 of them get picked up.
Yeah. I mean, it takes a lot. It takes a lot for something to be greenlit. Like you can do a pilot, and then people can just sit on that pilot like forever. It's really, I think, a great idea. It kind of like reminds me of Mike V, the skater, who is he was the singer of Black Flag. He was I know I don't know him, but I know of him. He had a reality show where he was kind of going like across country. It was like a trip thing. He would meet up with like skaters in really small areas and just like to connect with the skate community. It kind of reminds me of that. And then, well, on the Hollywood tip too, and I actually sat through the whole movie because I didn't, I knew about Fang, I knew about you, but I didn't really know that you have 2 pieces of like a body of work that you did. You were in 2 movies, right? You were in
very I wouldn't call that a body. That's maybe like the toenail of a pinky.
It's the toenail of your work.
The pinky nail.
The one because I'm I went to film school. That was something that I did like after I got out. So just when I found all that out, I was like, I had to try to search out the movies to watch them. I only found the one, and it was Blood and Tears, and they actually have you listed in the credits, but you're only in the very beginning when the guy is getting out of jail or he's getting out of prison.
I don't even know that one. There's
really?
So there was there was a movie called Downtime.
Yeah,
and
I couldn't find that one to watch, but yeah, that was on the list.
Yeah, that was it was just, it went straight to DVD, but in that I had a much bigger role in that. But it's funny, like the guy who made that, he was actually an old drug dealing partner of mine. He did 5 years in the feds, got out, went to film school, and then made that movie. Then I had a much bigger role in Downtime, and it's funny. I play like the shot caller for the white prison gang, and
So talk about that the experience of I guess acting in it, because you wouldn't consider yourself an actor, or maybe it wasn't even something that you aspired to do.
And I was, it happened, I don't know, I was still pretty fresh. I think that was maybe within 6 to 9 months of me paroling or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And
you're like, I don't need to act.
And that was the cool thing about that is that we filmed it on Alcatraz.
Oh,
And
that's really cool.
so, and like I got in touch with my buddy because I heard he was out and I heard he was doing good shit. So I got in touch with him. He's like, bro, he was like, you got to come be an extra in my movie. You know, I'm making this movie. We're filming on Alcatraz. I'm like, totally. Go out to Alcatraz. And I'm just doing this scene. I'm just going to be an extra. But, you know, I was still pretty fucking healthy, you know, and he films this scene where I'm an extra. He's like, and he ends up writing this whole character for me into the movie because I was so fresh from the fucking yard. It was like, you know, I wasn't acting. It was just, you know, it was super easy, you know, but so that was, I mean, I think it kicks around somewhere, but it's definitely not easy to find. And then I did a cameo in a movie a few years ago called Hollow Point.
Hollow Point.
Yeah, and that was I don't even know. Well, this director Daniel Zarelli, I'd met him years ago, and he hit me up, and it's a prison movie, you know. And in this, now I'm obviously much older. I play like the old prison guy, and I'm like tattooing this kid who's got these problems, and so
What's
you know,
what's the name of that one so I could
Hollow Point.
Oh, Hollow Point. Okay.
And that one you can find. You know, it's a short cameo, but it was fun to do. You know, and the cool thing about like Daniel, the guy that did that movie, you know, he knows my whole history. You know, we're friends, and he's like, hey, I'm going to set this scene up. He said, just say what you would. You know, there's no script. He just sets up the scenario. This is what's happening. He said, just go for it and see what, you know. And so we made this like makeshift bullshit tattoo machine, you know, and then I'm sitting there talking to the guy. So that's kind of funny, you know. But yeah, the body of work.
The body of work, the toenail of work. So that was something that it didn't spark your interest in, you know, like, I don't know, like Danny Trejo being found by Eddie Bunker when Danny Trejo went to go help out. Do you know the story behind that? And
yeah,
I think that's one of the coolest stories because I love Eddie Bunker, and the fact that like Danny Trejo is in the position that he's in is because he knew Eddie Bunker. You know, that he went to that.
I mean, I think that when I got clean and sober, you know, 14 years ago, and then I put this other band together called The Disciples. It was all like, and then we made this video, and through that I started working with that guy to maybe do this reality TV show.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
I thought that might be that something like that might be the path, but when it all fell apart, you know, I took it kind of hard because it was like a 2-year process, you know, like from the time, and like we kept, you know, like everything kept, you know, like when it all fell apart, I had 2 lawyers, I had an agent, you know, we were under contract with Bunham and Murray, who make The Real World. Like I thought this, you know, was going to really go somewhere. So when it did, so Bunham and Murray had done a 9-month option, and they just sat on it and it died.
Damn.
You know, but I mean, I was like, you know, had multiple meetings with them, and these are the people that Bunham and Murray created reality TV. You know, like they made Real World and many other reality TV shows. They were like the big time. So I really thought that you know, things were going to be changing. I think that you know, it's because of the nature of my crime, it's too controversial. And I also think that things happen for a reason. And I think that had everything like that taken off, I think it probably was for the best that it didn't. You know, that I spent a lot more time really trying to sit down, because after that fell apart, I was committed to making a bunch of money and opening up the halfway house for men, and that's what I did, and I had, like I worked with a lot of guys. I helped a lot of guys stay out of prison, not go back to prison, get sober, get clean. And I think that was far more important than, being on TV,
just well, on the, I guess the flip side of that as well is doing something very direct like that without having any spotlight on the fact that because I had no idea that I think it was my buddy Sick Boy that told me that you had been running a rehabilitation place. I had no clue. So if you had been on a reality show, say, oh, this guy's doing all this stuff, but I know this because he's putting it out there. You're doing that stuff just to do it without having the spotlight on you.
Right. Without there being a financial reason for it, or an ego reason for it,
right.
I think it's,
I was just, those are things that I battle with, internally, my motivations for everything, because as someone that grew up in an environment of manipulation of the self in order to get to a certain place, right, or to survive, I still deal with that. You know what I mean? Like my intent is my motivations, why I do this, or you know what I mean? But that's just some other fucking voice that I've learned to just like not pay attention to. That it's just about being committed to what I guess you believe in at a certain point, because you are who you are like right now, and you are not. I am definitely not that person that I was, but it's funny that that ego part will try to creep back in, and you know what I mean? And then it'll prevent me from doing certain things as well. It's the intention is a motherfucker when I'm like, what's the true intention of what I'm doing at this point?
right.
And
Right.
So you started that rehabilitation center. How long did that go on for?
For 6 years.
For 6 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And finally I had it was a great thing. I had a business partner, and he started using, and so ultimately that's why we closed the doors, but it was a great experiment, a great experience, and like I said, after we closed, I moved down to Southern California and was working as a drug and alcohol counselor for a year, but it had been a long run, and I needed to just step away for a while. I go in every Monday. There's a rehab here in Tucson, and I just go in and volunteer Monday nights, just to sort of keep my foot in the keep my foot in the door.
Yeah.
I think it's important to, at least for me, to especially work with and be around people that are new, that are coming in, either coming in off the streets or coming from jail, just to keep it real for me. I mean, it's been a long time since I've been to jail. It's been a long time since I've been locked up. It's been a long time since I fucking put a needle in my arm, and so I need to keep it real, and remind myself, it's like, no, that's like you're talking about how the ego and, how if you can manipulate, and if I am not careful, I can romanticize being homeless, smoking crack under a bridge.
Oh,
you know?
man.
And I don't even like crack.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
I was gonna say, minus the crack part, I'm right there with you. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy, like the shit that you can romanticize. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh well, yeah. Being connected, I think, to I just got connected to this youngster actually through the podcast. He's a Rudy Can't Fell on Instagram. I'm supposed to actually meet up with him. He just got off parole, and he's, I guess, I've never been to like a drug program. I mean, I had stopped doing meth, when I went to jail, and my main issue was like drinking alcohol, and then also I would do cocaine when I was like drinking. I had a skate shop that I lost, and it just went pretty heavy. And this was when I had my child already, who was 5, and I thought at that point I would never fuck around with that shit again. And then I found myself doing it way too much, and had, and I don't know if you go through this, but this is something that I go through, and I don't know if it's because of the experience, where you're so used to digging yourself out of a hole, that you're so used to that you almost find yourself putting yourself in that position where you have to do that again. And I don't know if that has to do, because I had quit drinking completely, where I was like, I'm rocking straight edge. July 22nd, I was just like, I focus on eating healthy, doing all these healthy things for my body. Alcohol just does nothing for me. It really it ruins it. And in a weird, insidious, like kind of way too, for me, it slowly creeps in over time. Did you battle with that, like going into a hole and having to dig yourself out of it?
I feel like I've been doing that all my fucking life, and I mean, like I said, even with even in sobriety, like I said, I thought, like we put all this work into the whole reality TV show that fell apart. It's like, okay, what now? Put all this work in, started the Sober House for Men. I opened up 2 tattoo shops, 2018, for separate reasons, but I had closed the tattoo shops, closed the Sober House for Men, and like, fuck, what now? Let's start again. Moved to Southern California, helped these guys open a treatment center, worked there for a year. And I'm like, dude, I'm burnt, So moved to Arizona, do something completely, like start fucking something again. So yes, unfortunately, I 100% fucking feel that I have to start over again. So at some point, hopefully I'll have learned some lesson that I'm missing, so
that's what I'm trying to get to at this point in my life.
Don't have to start over again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if anything, you have the band. That's the constant.
That has been a constant. Yes,
always a constant. And it's interesting because I had just listened to a podcast with Milo from the Descendants, and he was a scientist for so long, and the Descendants are the Descendants, and they're a huge band. You would think that he thinks he's like a full-time musician. It wasn't until really recently in his life where he was like, he gave up working at DuPont, and he's like, I'm much more happier making other people happier with my band. And he just stopped working at where he was working at as a scientist, and was just like, I'm going to do this full time. And it's just interesting. It's like, well, why wouldn't you do that in the first place? Like, this is what makes so many people happy, and I'm sure that you're happy doing it too. But it took him a while to like get to that point where he's like, okay, this is it.
Also too, I mean, punk rock, there's there's a few bands that make money doing it. I mean, the Descendants probably make a but as far as like supporting yourself, and like if you have a family or anything like that, there's not a lot of money in it,
Yeah. Right.
and so I think another way to look at it for him, and I don't know if this is true, this is just a guess, his career at DuPont made it possible for him to get to a point where he could go, okay, like I have, like maybe he owns his own house now, he doesn't have a mortgage anymore,
Right.
where he can afford to not have to make, as much money, and he can do what he loves to do. For me, I've always had to work, but one of the reasons that I do work is so that, that I can go in and play, and do shows. I mean, given that, I, was a, violent convicted felon and spent years in prison, I was able to get my passport back. Fang has played, in Brazil, and
You guys played in Cuba, right? You were the first.
Cuba, of Mexico many times, Europe, like Japan, like we've gone all over the fucking place, which, and that's the other thing I think is important, as far as like, if you've been to the pen, if you've done time, you can still follow your dreams, follow your passion, like I will say that, when you go into Japan, you have to fill out a questionnaire, and they ask you if you've ever been arrested before. And there's a old friend of mine, and he's an old Oakland pimp, and spent a bunch of years in and out of prison, but he been clean a long time, been out for a long time. He works as a consultant for rehabs. And I called him, I'm like, hey, and I know he'd been to Japan, but I know he's, been in that, he was an ex-con, he'd been to prison. I'm like, so you've been to Japan? I'm like, what do you do? He goes, I don't normally tell people this, but he goes, you just lie.
He said, yeah.
He said, when they ask if you've ever been arrested for it, just say no. And he goes, yeah, and unless they really have some reason to think that maybe there's, something shady about you or whatever, he said they'll probably just let you in. So both me and my bass player's a ex-felon too, we get to Japan, we just go, nope, never been arrested. And they didn't take another look at us.
That's on every application I ever filled out after getting locked up. I always put no. And I was like, they're either going to take the time to like look at it and then find out the truth, and it's like, okay, well, I didn't lose anything, I never had the job in the first place. But I mean, I ended up working at a Conroy's Flowers in Redondo Beach in the South Bay around Mother's Day. They needed a bunch of drivers, and I ended up working there. Like, that's the most corporate place that you could work, and I ended up getting a job there. So that whole, you can't find a job because you're an ex-felon, it's definitely a lot harder. But I mean, you have those.
Here's another thing that, so I was working at this drug and alcohol program, and I wore a lot of hats at this one program I worked at, but one of them was like, I was HR, like I would and so I was in charge of running everybody's, like I'd have to get their information, and I'd have to run them to see if they were felons or, like what they're, and so when the first person I ran was, I mean, the people that I worked for totally knew about my history, and one of the owners, he'd done like a bunch of time too. So I ran both me and him, and we're paying for this service as a business, like you pay them a certain amount of money to run people's IDs to check. We both came back clean. And I'm like, we were laughing. And so I ran everybody that worked at this facility, and I think half the employees all had felonies. One was had a felony 18 months prior to working there. None of them fucking came up, and this is a paid force. So I think a lot of that's just bullshit as far as, I mean, I think that there are probably some more legit companies that you could, but if you are a felon, like you said, I would always just say no,
Oh,
Have
yeah.
you ever been, and then I figured this is the way I always looked at it. It's like, well, if I get hired and it comes up later, which it has, by then people have gotten to know me. They
Mhm.
know my work ethic. They know what I can do. And only one time did I have a boss like pull me up and he's like, hey, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, would you have hired me if I'd have said, and he's like, no, you're probably right. He's like, okay, get back to work,
Yeah.
because he knew me and he knew my work ethic. So, so yeah, that's definitely one thing that I'd say,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I look forward to talking to, younger cats like that guy Rudy, just to see how different it is, because I'm sure that the time that you got out, then the time that I got out, so many people have been incarcerated and so many people
That's true
have
too.
felonies versus, you know what I mean? At one point, you got to accept the guys with the tattoos on their arms. You know what I mean? Like this, like everybody has tattoos now. There
Right.
has to be like a shift or something. I wanted to actually ask you about playing in Cuba, because you talked about a little bit earlier. You and
Verbal abuse.
Verbal Abuse. That's right. You guys were the first American bands to play in Cuba, and this was after they lifted the embargo, or not, or where you couldn't. What was the?
So that we were the first American punk rock bands to play in Cuba. I'm sure we weren't the first American bands to go down there, but it was right around when they had, but right before they lifted the embargo, and then of course they lifted it, and then Trump became president, and it got shut down again.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
But we were able, like, we had to go through the Ministry of Culture, and it was just kind of a weird fluke thing that happened, and it had more to do with the guitar player for Verbal Abuse. He had some connections with some folks, and they had they mostly did heavy metal, and they would bring European metal bands to Cuba. And so through this guy David, we worked it out to go down and do this tour and play in Cuba. And that, to me, like, as far as something to be proud of, I'm super proud that that we did that. Like, I'm super stoked that we were able to do that, especially because now everything's shut down again. We couldn't fly direct. We had to go through Mexico. So we went down, we played a bunch of shows in Mexico, and then we flew from Mexico to Cuba. And then we were on this organized, it's like a tour. There was 4 European bands and 2 American bands. And the 4 European bands were like metal bands, and then there's 2 American punk rock bands. But when we played Havana, there was this whole crew of like punk rock kids that came, and I met these punk rock kids, and I'm hanging out with them, and they're like, look, we have this underground club here in Havana. Would you guys be willing to come and play? And I'm like, well, let me check, let me find out if we can, and if we can, we will. And so I went to the promoter, and I told him, I said, look, these kids have these underground club, is it going to get you into trouble, or is it going to fuck you over if we go and play this show? Because I didn't want to put, because it's still Cuba, I didn't want to put him in a position to get into trouble. And he goes, no, you guys should do that. So we worked it all out. And I mean, this was like, they had, we brought our guitars with us, but we didn't have any amps. And so they had this, basically it was like this shell of a fucked up building in Havana. It was sort of like their underground punk rock club. And they had a fucked up drum kit and a chair. They didn't have like a drum throne. And everybody plugged, and they had this fucked up PA, and the guitars and bass and the vocals all plugged into the PA. There were no amps. And so it was all just like the drummer and everybody through the PA, and it was amazing. It was like, I mean, and there was like some Havana underground punk rock bands that played, and it was a amazing like underground show in Cuba.
Did it bring
that I'll
bring
never
you?
forget.
Did it bring you back to the times of playing in the 80s?
Yeah,
when you
it was
first got
like
it? Just the energy,
like
right?
total underground, like for real underground, and having it, in Cuba, it was that was like, I'll never forget that.
That's awesome. What year that was? Right before, or there was a, because I felt like you were in Mexico when I first hit you up. You said you would hit me up when you get back. Was it around that? Was it that time?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I don't know.
Yeah.
6 years ago.
Oh no. Okay,
5 years ago. This was a while back. It was right because they were just about to open Cuba up. It was it was when Obama was still president. It was before Trump became president, because once Trump became president, everything, that all got shut down, and it was so I don't know. I'd have to look back. But it's been a while.
That's awesome.
I'm still in touch with some people in Cuba.
Did anybody shoot video or get photos?
There is some video. We put together a music video called California to Cuba, and it's on YouTube, and you can see.
Check it out.
Yeah, it's just like, look, Fang California to Cuba. It should pop up, and it's got some video clips. It's it's just one song, but it's like and it's got a bunch of clips from different shows and stuff down there.
How much time do you got? I don't want to take too much of your time.
Dude, I have no idea. I don't even know what time it is.
Okay,
we probably have been talking for way longer than we should have.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually the case. Well, it's not always the case, but it's I mean, I could just sit and listen to you tell stories all day. I mean,
bullshit all day.
Yeah, I love that type of shit. Well, okay, really, one question that I wanted to ask that was sort of premeditated was when you decided to do the band, the Disciples, where did that choice come from? And then I didn't even know anything about it until I started doing just research, and then I saw this band, and it was like the style was completely kind of different.
Right.
What sparked that?
It was like a rehab romance.
I love your honesty about when you do certain things.
I went to rehab and met a drummer, and when I got out of rehab, that drummer and I, he hadn't played drums in a long time, but I was like, you should start playing drums. Let's put a band together, and so that was that's it. Like rehab bands, rehab romances, they never work out in the long run, but they're fun while they last, right?
Yeah.
But we did we did a music video, and it was that was like a lot more.
It was shot well.
Yeah, it was
a good. It was the video was the video
like a professional video, and so it was interesting times. But the whole band was like certainly far. That's the most commercial thing I've ever done.
See, yeah, that's interesting, because especially the video itself, I was like, wait, the production value on the video is like really good. I was like, where did this come from, and how come I never heard anything about it? And then that was like the only thing. That was the only thing that was on there, and I was just sort of clueless about what happened. But yeah,
but we have a CD. We put out a CD. I don't think I never got it. At some point, I still, like with everything else, I got a lot. I want to get it put up on, Spotify. That I've got some other side project bands that are now up.
Yeah,
You know,
it took them. So I had American Nightmare either on cassette tape or CD. I probably had both, but one of them was my actual copy. You know, you're usually supposed to leave everything behind to everybody when you leave. There's definitely like a few items that I was like, nah,
no,
I'm bringing the
taking that shit with me.
American Nightmare was one of them, and then of course Spotify came out, and it wasn't on Spotify for the longest time, and I
No,
remember.
just recently,
Was that
in the
because of
last
you, or is that because is it Wingnut Records that it was on, right?
yeah,
Oh,
it was. I had to work it out with Wingnut Records so that we could put it up there, and that took a while, and also just because it wasn't. Uh, like there's a couple other records. We have another CD that came out in 2012. It's not up on Spotify. Here Come the Cops.
okay.
Um, and so there's some other music that I just still haven't taken the time to sit down and orchestrate and get it together to do that with. But at some point, hopefully in the next year or so, that was what I was trying to do when we did American Nightmare, and I had another album, Spun Helga, and that got put up on Spotify, and we were starting to get the whole catalog put up on on all the platforms, and then the label folded, so now we're
Gotcha.
sort of back at square one.
But
But
definitely, there's people out there that definitely appreciated it, and I'm one of them. So I definitely appreciate you taking that time. Another another thing too that I want. So I cover. We were Sick Boy and I were in a punk rock band in Susanville. Somehow we were able to orchestrate that. But I covered Guns Not Love, and I played that song on the yard, and it was one of the best feelings. So anytime
no way, that's
yeah,
awesome.
it
That's
was
fucking awesome.
it was in there was actually a pit at one point.
Holy
There was
shit.
there was a good amount of punk rockers, and then you had like the knucklehead skinheads. Another thing too I wanted to ask you is, do you have a dislike for skinheads?
Oh no, everybody gets that all confused. I wrote Skinhead Smoke Dope because I was a skinhead kid.
Yeah,
and I smoked weed. It was like
yeah.
there was like this whole backlash against like you skinheads, you can't smoke weed. And I'm like, fuck you, skinhead smoke dope.
Yeah.
No, it's like
okay.
I think that there's like some sort of I don't really self-identify as a skinhead, but I did at one point when I was a kid.
Yeah.
When I was a youngster, like 14, 15.
So how was it
no.
with so I'm assuming like traditional skinhead, and then we had like the racist skinheads, which it was I'd actually gotten quite a few fights with those guys, and it always, because they would borrow the punk rock stuff, and then Sick Boy, he would always have those guys buying new punk rock because he just wanted a lot of punk rock on the yard. Like we had a really good catalog, so he was always like, if a dude was a metalhead, he would, oh, if you like this, then you'll really like this. You know what I mean? Like
Check this out.
Yeah, a little bit related, but the guy would be like, I didn't really like it. And then he'd be like, well, you should let me have it if you don't really like it. But it was just funny because there was a skinhead that loved NoFX. And when I found out like Mike was, I was like, do you know that guy that you love, like you have a NoFX tattooed on you? You know that guy's Jewish, right? He's like, yeah, but I don't care. I really like their music. I was like, can't you just get rid of all your that side of your beliefs? I mean, if you're able to do that for a band. But yeah, that was definitely like a really, really cool moment for me to be able to sing that song on the yard. And then there was, like I said, there was like a little pit going.
That's crazy, because that's when I went to the Hole in Soledad, I tried to introduce punk rock to the yard, and it did not go well.
Yeah.
it caused a lot of problems. I should never have walked off that yard alive.
Wow.
it got real fucked off. And then I was in solitary for 5 months behind it. And like I said, it was in my jacket for inciting, and it went
Shit. So
it went really bad.
all that
you know.
stemmed from you trying to introduce punk rock to
Yeah.
Wow.
They were not. This was I don't know, maybe 92, I guess, and they were not ready for punk rock on the yard in Soledad in 1992. And but that's
Wow.
a. I've told that story before, but that's a story for another
Yeah,
time.
that's crazy. No, I'd never heard of that. But I definitely got shit from like Peckerwoods. Like you listen to that kill your mother shit, and it's just like, I'm here listening to Bad Religion. This guy has a PhD, he's a professor, like, and you're trying to dumb down the lyrics, you know what I mean? But yeah, that was definitely a cool moment. So it was like really cool to be able to talk to you and tell
That's
you
awesome.
that.
I know. I really. That makes me all warm and fuzzy inside.
Nirvana covering Fang, some random dude in prison in a punk rock band cover. You know what I mean? Both sides of the
I think it's far more impressive playing that song on the yard than it was playing it at the reading festival, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh yeah, that's so cool. I wanted to end it too because I mean, I guess I could ask you outside of the podcast, but one of the last texts that we did, I told you that I went to go see you play at the Anarchy Library, and you're like, "Oh, that was a shit show," or it was terrible, or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Why?
That's a long story.
Okay, because in my mind, I got my "Where the Wild Things Are" T-shirt, and then I ended up in the LA Times in a photo, and you're in it, and it was an article on how you came to LA to play or something like that, and I'm in the background, and then you're doing your thing or whatever. So like, for me, my memory of that show is like, man, it was amazing.
Well, we played there twice. One of those shows was really bad. I just come from Chicago. I'd been shot, and so it was I came out of the hospital. I had to sit on a stool. That's the only time I've not been, like, I actually had to sit down while we played.
Oh wow.
So maybe it was the other time we played the Anarchy Library then.
2004. Yeah, I think it was 2004 or 2005.
Played there twice. So one time was real bad. Like I said, I was really fucked off. I tried to go do that rapid fucking detox thing, and anyway, it's a long story, but yeah.
All right, good to know. All right, well, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you for your time. I appreciate chatting it up with you.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, for sure. Are you going on tour soon? I know you just came back.
Yeah, we did a run on the East Coast. I don't have anything particularly lined up 100% yet. I know that we're supposed to do a festival in Europe this summer, but the way things are right now, it's such a fucked up time for music, that I'm kind of just biding our time. And we were supposed to record another album, but that's been put on hold because one of our guitar players is pretty fucked up right now with cancer. So, everything's kind of up in there. We did put out a 7-inch split CD, which is on, we have it on our merch site. It's got a song called Minneapolis, and that's about the George Floyd riots. And we made a video of that song. It's not quite as professional as the Disciples video, more along the old school punk rock lines, but you can check that out. It's on YouTube. It's called Minneapolis.
All right, I'll make sure to put a link in the description so they can just
and then that split 7-inch just came out like a month or two ago, and it's got a couple new songs on it. And then I'm sure we'll at some point finish recording the whole album, and we'll be back out on the road at some point this year. I just am not sure where and when yet.
Okay. And one last question that I like to ask: what does it mean to be free for you?
What does it mean to be free? It means I don't have to carry a knife in my ass. I was waiting for the whole aside. It's like fun things you've had to stick in your butt in the prison. It's like, what does it mean to be free? Yeah, I don't have to be hyper vigilant. However, still many years later, I find myself doing it anyway. But being free allows me to, being free really allows me to be a good father. It allows me to be a good partner, to my fiance. It allows me to, for me, it's allowed me to travel the world. I will say, this is my favorite quote, and I will end it with this. If you can't be happy for what you have, be glad you didn't get what you deserved. And I know that because I have been able to remain free, I've got a life that I certainly don't deserve, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, I concur. I agree with you. Definitely. Well, I appreciate that, Sam. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or YouTube. Check out all the links in the description below to all your. I'm putting all of your body of work on there, or your finger.
The toenail.
The toenail. Yeah. This has been another episode of Screaming at a Wall. Stay free, everybody.
What are you rebelling against?
What do you got?
We were trying to change something.
Skateboarding is a way of learning how to redefine the world around you.
The owners of this country don't care about the poor and the
Now, baby, push me. Push me again now.
Screaming at a wall.